Hey folks, it's Rob Flux here with another Sunday session, and today is a very special event. It is called Over the Horizon, and this is where I'm going to show you what I do in order for me to assess where I think the market is actually going. And I guess in doing so, I've been doing this publicly on record. Excuse me, frog in my throat. I've been doing this publicly on record for quite some time, many years. And so you'll know, if you've been watching me for some time, that where I think we are right now is a very unique position. And I've been calling this out for over 2 years in particular. So 2 years ago, I said it's 2 years away. Then I said it's 18 months away, then 12, 6. And the moment is now, folks. It is an absolutely epic time in our market. Now, before I go into the details of what I'm going to cover today, I guess it's super important that I give a legal disclaimer. I'm not a property economist. I'm not a financial planner. I'm not trying to give you in any way, shape, or form advice on what to do. Instead, what I want to show you is what it is that I do to assess the market, understand how I interpret it, and then I want you guys to do your own research and determine whether or not you're coming to the same sorts of conclusions. Okay, go talk to your appropriate financial planner, those sorts of things. Super important that you do that. Okay, now that said, it is a cracking time in my humble opinion. This is 37 years I've been in the property game. Bought my first house at the age of 18, my first investment property at the age of 21. And now at the old age of, I've been through a couple of recessions. I've been through a couple of things, and I've seen the patterns of what's actually happening. So I want to show you what it is that I'm seeing, why it is. I'm going to show you a whole bunch of charts and a whole bunch of super useful information. Now, if any of you joined me last weekend on Sunday at an event called the Developer Launchpad, I covered the same content, but I'm going to try and cover it with a little bit less of a rush. We were a little bit time constrained last weekend, and give you something that you can rewind and watch again and that sort of thing. So hoping that you guys get plenty out of this experience. Now, where to from here? Look, I want to set the scene first, okay? We're in a very unique time, and the only time in my 37 years in property that I've ever seen a setup exactly like it is right now. And that is because for the first time in forever, we are completely predictable in where we are. Okay, everything that's led up to here has been a whole series of events which were not the market itself doing work, but rather some external forces impacting the market. So what I mean by that is we had COVID, which caused a false recession. Okay, so our economy was doing pretty good, wasn't doing amazing, was doing pretty good. We had some downwards, but I think the politicians and everything were happy with it. The RBA was happy with it at the time. They're trying to do a couple of things to kind of ignite us, but we weren't in a bad shape. Then we had COVID with that artificial recession where everything got locked down. Now, it doesn't just impact us. It impacted the world globally. So there were some global logistical supply chains impacts that had massive effects on everyone's economy. And then after that, because everyone's economy was doing poor, the government did all it could do to reignite the economy, and they printed money in the form of a building bonus, and it created a building boom. Now that building boom hit every single one of the challenges that were caused by the logistical supply chain, and so because we had lockdowns in the manufacturing plants and lockdowns at the shipping wharves and all those sorts of things, all of the supply chain started to get slowed down. Plus, globally, every other government body had pretty similar ideas in trying to reignite their economies as well by printing money through building incentives and the like. And so there was a massive impact on the cost of materials, which then caused a massive amount of cost rises and escalations, not just in the building area, but inflation in itself. And so those two events were man-made. I guess COVID itself wasn't, but the actual shutdown and then the printing of the money was. But the underlying market fundamentals that were sitting underneath are what we are now starting to come back from those two man-made events. And so that's how I'm reading it. and I'm going to show you some facts and figures and that sort of thing, and some actual numbers to back up what it is that I'm seeing, with the appropriate, I guess, source links, so everybody can fact check everything that I'm actually talking about today. Now, that said, I guess there's a couple of ways to actually interpret the market. Okay, there's the way a traditional property economist will actually look at it, and then there's how myself as a property developer is looking at it, because I'm trying to not only understand what the market's doing right here, right now, but I'm also trying to work out where my market's going to be by the time I sell my finished product. Okay, because I need to operate in those two zones, because if the market is going up when I sell my finished product, I get a win. If the market is going down when I sell my finished product, then any manufactured profits are potentially lost. And so I need to be able to stress test my deals and make sure that they actually work. So that said, I'm going to do some PowerPoint slides. I don't usually do PowerPoint slides, but I'm going to do that. I'm not in my normal environment today. I'm just on a laptop. So I'm trying to do all of this button pushing just with, I guess, one figure. So I'm not sure how well this is going to work, folks. So let's see. Okay. So first of all, let's turn on our slide share. So my prediction, why now is the time to take some massive action. Okay. I think it's a time where we're going to be not only getting our profits from our manufactured profits, but we're also going to be getting our profits from, I guess, the market uplift that I think is going to come. Now, that's my bold prediction. Again, not advice, folks. Okay, not advice, but rather my read on the market. So now, will my laptop allow me to advance the PowerPoint slides while I'm in presentation mode? I don't know. Okay, let's have a look here. So firstly, I want to give you some insights into how to read the market. There are things called indicators and things called drivers. Now, both of these are ways of actually measuring the market. So an indicator is what traditional investors actually use. This is measures something that has already happened. So, for example, auction clearance rates, median house prices, days on market, they're events that have happened. So that is very easy in looking at what's happened, because that's factual. Okay. Now, factual events are easy to go, well, this is what's happened. Problem with that is it's actually looking back in time with things that have happened. Now, market drivers, on the other hand, are what's going to predict what's going to happen next to the market. So let's have a look at these. So market indicators, so some further detail on that. So how are they used? Well, it's what typical property commentators use to report on what's happening in the market. The media typically report on what the property commentator says. So media themselves aren't usually that smart. They're just regurgitating what the commentator has actually said. And then the public respond to the media. So there's always a little bit of a lag with what the public's doing. And then finally, your taxi driver, when he's telling you what's actually going to happen, he's so far behind what's actually happened, it's not funny. So what's wrong with an indicator? Well, an indicator has a significant lag, anywhere from 4 to 6 months, on the actual action and the sentiment of the person putting the property on the market in the first place. Now, let me explain why that's the case. So firstly, I'm thinking of selling a property. And by thinking of selling a property, then I have to make some decisions. I need to go talk to a real estate agent. Maybe I might talk to several real estate agents. I've got to sign my agency agreement. I've then got to prepare the house for market. I need to maybe stage it, take some photos, put it on the market, do an advertising campaign, maybe an auction campaign, finally get a contract of sale, and then 30 days later settle. So a decision back here was made based on where I felt the market was at the time. And the result is measured 4 to 6 months later on. Okay. And that's the key to, I guess, the market indicator being a lag. So it's a lagging indicator with what's already happened. So any market sentiment or anything like that, that is sitting there, I guess, is a representation of what has already happened. But it's a good view on the people's thinking right here, right now. Okay. Now, some examples of market indicators. So if you're looking at stock availability, there's listing volume, sales volume, stock on market, for example. If you're looking for investment stock, there's vacancy rates and rental yields. Some stock turnover measures would be days on market, auction clearance rates, vendor discount rates. So I was listing at this price and it actually sold for this price. And then there's the market sentiment, so consumer confidence and business confidence. So all of those together, all lagging indicators, okay? All of them are measuring things that have already happened, okay? Now, If we want to use an idea to read the market, this is from a very, very reputable property economist. His name is John Lindeman. This is an extract of one of his blogs called Timing the Turning Point. Okay, and it's going to give you just two indicators that if you keep a close eye on a regular basis, it'll give you some insights into what's happening in the market. So sales volumes and listing volumes. So let me show you what this will actually mean. So if you see both the sales volumes going up and the listing volumes going up, that's an indication that the market is actually confident. Okay. If you see the opposite going direction, that's telling you that the market is actually concerned. Where it gets super interesting is where there's a crisscross of these. Okay. So for example, if your listings are going up, okay, so lots of people putting lots of property on the market, but nobody is actually selling, so the sales volumes are going down, that's telling you it's a crashing market. And a lot of people are trying to get in and sell it while they can before things start to actually drop. And what tends to happen there is one person gets desperate and they drop their price because there's so much competition. And then the next person gets desperate, so they drop their price because there's so much competition. And it then starts an avalanche event, and hence it starts to crash. Now, the other crisscross is the other way. Okay, that's where the sales volumes are up, but the listings are down. And that's because the market is actually going up. And so if I'm holding onto a property and I know the market's going up, I'm wanting to wait. I want to sit on it, and wait until I see that where I think is the top of the market before I put it on. Okay, so that tends to happen where when that happens, anything that goes on the market turns over super, super fast. Everybody starts pouncing on things because the market is moving so fast. But everyone who can afford to hold on to a property will hold on to it in order to get the maximum return out of it. So that said, let's go around the grounds and actually start to look at some of the markets out there with both the sales volumes and listing volumes and get a feel for where the market is right this very second. Okay. So this is from SQM Research. So this is looking at the Sydney listings, and you can see in the last 3 to 4 months, there is a downward trend on the Sydney listings. If I go to Melbourne and look at the listings, again, a downward trend. If I look at the Brisbane listings, again, a downward trend. We're sensing a theme here, folks. If I look at Adelaide listings, again, a downward trend. So this is I guess giving us some insights that from a listings perspective, not much is happening. So in our mind, we're looking for, well, are the sales volumes also down, or have we got a crisscross event type happening here? So this is the kind of thing that we're actually looking at. Now, I won't look at every single capital city all the way around the country because that's going to take some time, but everyone can actually go look this up. SQM Research, very, very reputable source of data, and I guess well worthwhile. Some of their market research is amazing. So now let's have a look at sales volumes. This comes from CoreLogic, and you can see in the green box the breakdown of each individual city by itself, and you can see Melbourne is down, Brisbane is down, Adelaide is down, Perth is up, Hobart is up. Okay, Darwin is down. So you can see some of our markets are down and some of them are up. But overall, if we look at overall Australia-wide, overall we are on a downwards trend. Now, we need to look at this very subjectively. So Perth being up is a crisscross type event. Adelaide, Brisbane and Melbourne being down is a crisscross type event. So you get the idea, folks. Okay, so sales volumes and listings, I guess both on a downward trend, predominantly across the board, although there are some minor exceptions in other places. So if we go back to John Lindeman, this is telling us that predominantly we are in a downwards trend. However, in some instances, some locations, we are starting to show that boom type market. So for example, Sydney, if I pop back here, Sydney's sales volumes are up. So I can actually see here sales volumes are up, even though the listings are down. So Sydney is starting to take off, but everyone else is starting to be concerned. So gives us some fairly good ideas on some of the challenges that we've got in the market. Remember, this is a lagging indicator, but I guess if I'm going to be looking at this, I guess where this is actually then representative is if we have a look at the dwelling values on a rolling 3-month average. you can see the orange line in the rolling 3-month average. Dwelling values are down predominantly, which is a good reflection that those two downward trends are working, with the exception of Sydney, as I touched on. Okay. Now, that said, I guess it's a bit too early to tell, right? Remember, this is a lagging indicator, and the only time we're actually going to know whether or not this is correct is when we wait far enough in time to know whether or not that lag has actually hit. So, but my assertion here is that some of the markets are starting to turn, and I guess you saw a couple of them there, but I think we may have just witnessed for the first time in relative accuracy that this may be the bottom of the market. Now, okay, I can't, this is no guarantees. There's no, again, I'm not an economist. I'm not giving you advice, but everything that I'm seeing here is actually telling us that hey, things are in a tricky spot. So the question is, we know it's going to turn at some point, because markets always go up and down. The question is, when will it turn, and what are the things that we're actually going to look at? So that's what I want to try and look at now, is market drivers. Market drivers are the things that actually move the market. Okay, so what are they? Well, they cause the market to move, and it helps a smart investor or a savvy developer to actually predict where the market is going, because it's the inputs into why people make the decisions to buy or sell. Okay. So what's wrong with them? Well, it's a little bit of a black art to interpret. There's no real science to it. There's no scoreboard per se in order to do this. So I've come up with a scoreboard that works for me. Okay. I'm going to encourage you guys to come up with your own scoreboard, but this, I'm going to show you how I break it down and how it actually has meaning to me. Okay. They require you to pay close attention to all facets of the market, okay? And there's no one single source of data; it's everywhere. So it is genuinely a black art, okay? So what I'm going to try and do is demystify the black art a little bit and give you some insights into how I'm interpreting it. Okay, so market drivers help us to predict the future. So there's 4 different categories. So government incentives. So government incentives come in the form of major infrastructure projects, so both federal, state, and local government, and also some cash incentives and bonuses. There's population growth that goes into some of these drivers. So births, deaths, and marriages, interstate, intrastate, and international migration. There's supply and demand, so development approvals, building approvals, construction industry, health, and finance approvals. And then lastly, purchasing power. Can we actually afford to buy the stuff in the first place? Now, when you put all of those things together, there's 4 different categories and 16 separate individual drivers. When you actually look at all of those together and actually get a feel for the market as a whole, then you'll get a view as to what is actually happening. So now, in order to do that, I'm going to show you how I use this to try and use this as a crystal ball. And what I do is I use the drivers to assess where I think the market is going. And then I wait 6 months and I look back at the indicators and go, was I actually correct? Now, if I do that regularly and consistently enough, I create myself a bit of a feedback loop that then gives me more insights into what weighting I'm going to put for or against on certain elements. Okay. So if you repeat this process consistently and repeatedly, you're going to hone your skills and you're going to be able to do this all for yourself. Okay. Now, in order to do this, as I said, there is no such thing as a scoreboard. So I've got a concept of a scoreboard that I call headwinds and tailwinds. So I want you to imagine that you're walking down the street, and if you had the wind at your back and it was blowing at a gale at your back, you would feel the force on your back and it would be pushing you forwards, okay? So that is called a tailwind. If it's pushing you forwards, it's helping you move in the direction that you want to go. If, on the other hand, the wind was blowing into my face and it was pushing me backwards, okay, it would be what I call a headwind. So that's going to push me backwards and it's going to create resistance and difficulty for me to actually move in the direction I want to go. Now, clearly neutral means, I guess, that the wind is not blowing at all, or location specific might mean that one area has a headwind, but by doing so, it actually creates a tailwind somewhere else because the market has to maintain equilibrium. So for interstate and intrastate migration, where people move out of the city and to the regional, or to the regional and to the city, well, one wins and one loses. The same with interstate, okay? So if somebody moves out of one city and moves to another city, then one loses and one wins, okay? So that's the idea of the location specific. So now, because I've been doing this for some time, this is where I believe that we were, I guess, for the last 18 months with the predictions that I've actually done. And what I'm going to try and cover today is where I think the next 6 months and 12 months is actually going to be going, okay? So you can see the last little while, we've been fairly neutral across the board, a couple of tailwinds, so, slightly up. But depending upon where you were, location specific, a headwind or two and a headwind or two. So relatively neutral. And that's been for some time, until previously, if we go back some time, where we actually had, everything slowing down. And as we're falling off of the building boom, so there's a whole bunch of headwinds that were actually sitting against us. So I'm going to break all of these down. I'm going to go into all of the 16 categories. Now, notice that I haven't got all 16 on the scoreboard here. That's because some of them, whilst they are interesting from a weighting perspective, they probably don't have a huge amount of bearing on the outcome from my assessment, okay? Now, let's have a look. So government incentives, what are the things that are actually happening in the government incentives world? So major infrastructure projects, when governments spend billions and billions of dollars, and they put it in areas, it's called trickle-down economics. When they're spending billions of dollars on projects, it creates jobs in local areas. When those jobs are created in local areas, people spend money in local areas, which means that the local business, so the local news agent, the local, coffee shop, those sorts of things, they all start to get money spent. So they start to employ people. So those people are now employed. They start spending money. And so what happens is you start to build vibrancy in an area. So whenever a government is spending major infrastructure projects, it's a great leading indicator that there is prosperity coming to that area, depending upon what the project is, clearly. Okay, so you can see that New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, and WA all have some massive infrastructure projects underway, and I guess to a lesser extent, the rest of the states kind of roll out from there. Okay, now when we start to look at this, this is I guess how and when the money is starting to hit. So we're kind of in this vicinity here. So these projects have been rolling out for some time, and you can see where the money is actually being spent. And you can see that we've still got a few years to go left of that spending actually occurring. Now, the reason why I say that is all of this infrastructure spending started to happen as we came out of COVID, and we had to kickstart our economy. The government didn't just do building bonuses, but it did these major infrastructure projects. Now, these were projects that were, in most instances, already in the pipeline, already planned, already ready to go, but they were held off for a variety of reasons, and some of them were actually brought forward many, many years because we had to kickstart our economy. It's a good way for governments to actually do that. So that's why you see, I guess, not much was happening all the way back in Q3 of 2021, and then all of a sudden it's kind of taken off. But it's going to last for a good couple of years yet, folks. Okay. Now, what are some of the largest infrastructure projects around the country? Well, you've got the WestConnex, you've got Sydney Metro, Melbourne Metro, Melbourne to Brisbane Inland Rail, a whole bunch of things like that. So notice that almost all of them are major road or rail or transport type projects, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to activate an area where people are not living and want to get them to somewhere where they want to get to work and things like that. So if I want to activate an area for some urban growth, then that area means that they still have to get to work and that sort of thing. So major infrastructure projects are a really good source of understanding where an area is going to take off soon. Okay, so these are all the way around the country, folks. Look up Infrastructure Australia if you're looking for all the projects that you're actually sitting out there. Okay, now when all of these when all of this happened, I should say, there was a whole bunch of other things happening in the market at the same time. by coincidence, and some of that will play out, not coincidence, I should say, because there was a whole bunch of other market forces that'll get to play out. And in 16th of August last year, the National Cabinet met and said, hey, we've got this housing crisis going on. And so in case we've been living under a rock, the cost of rents have been going up. There's not much new housing supply, and there's a whole bunch of things happening, all of which I'm going to play out in this particular presentation. But the National Cabinet said, hey, this housing crisis is pretty nasty. And so we're seeing a giant bubble in the economy that's basically saying if we don't build houses now, it might be too late. And so they got all the state government leaders together at the National Cabinet, and they all walked away with some directives to say, you need to work out how you're going to build more stuff because you need to put more people in your locations. Now, that said, that was back in August last year. Now, governments move slowly. It takes time for them to come up with initiatives and time for them to actually roll out the legislation that sit behind those initiatives. So far, only 2 states have actually announced the outcomes of that. Okay, so those 2, New South Wales and Queensland. So I'm going to talk to those 2, I guess, in a couple of secs. So the New South Wales government first. So the New South Wales Premier Chris Minns and also the Planning Minister announced their intention to change a whole bunch of zoning rules in order to allow for fast track of certain kind of developments. So specifically, what is called a Complying Development Code, CDC. So they released a CDC code quite some time ago, and they didn't give it enough teeth at the time, and they gave local governments an ability to actually, I guess, disempower some of that the legislation they had in place and actually put exceptions in place as to what could or could not occur. This time round, they've gone back at having a second crack at this, and they're actually tightening it down. And what it's going to do is going to release a whole bunch of currently zoned R2 land and some R3 land that was not development capable, and giving it massive uplifts. Okay, so the R2 land, in order to give duplexes, they've said, well, rather than in most councils a 650 square meter block, we're going to make it as small as a 450 square meter block. And if you are in an R3, and you're close to one of these major transport corridors, and in particular a bus station or train station, or what they call a transport hub, then we're going to give you an uplift from 3 stories to 6 stories. So massive incentives to say we need to build more stuff. Okay, and they've also named a couple of specific regions. So Central Coast, Hunter Valley, and Illawarra, for example, where they want to activate that even further. So that's the New South Wales government. Now, those initiatives are the intention for the legislation to go live. That is out on public consultation right now. It's your opportunity to go and say, yes, I love it. No, I hate it. Those sorts of things. And then it's intended to come in, I believe, on the 1st of July. So some time to actually have your feedback on that as to whether or not you think they've actually gone aggressive enough. I think it's a fantastic initiative for what they've done. It's probably one of the better initiatives that I think all of the states are going to come up with. And I guess because it's state-based and it pushes down, it means that a complying development application, the councils will not be able to refuse. And that means that you're going to be able to fast track and get your approvals for things very super fast. Now, Queensland government have also come up with some initiatives. So Queensland Premier Stephen Mills has announced a 5-pillar strategy. Okay. Now, some of those pillars won't really impact us as small-scale developers, but I guess there are a couple in there. So build more homes faster. Well, that's a big statement, okay, but they want to build 1 million new homes by 2046, with 95% of that in the private housing market, okay? They want to support more renters. They're going to do a whole bunch of things to change the rules around renting, so how many times you can lift the rent in a year and all those sorts of things, and also give some, I guess, relief packages to renters that are actually struggling. So both of those good initiatives, but they don't really help us, okay? The next one does help us massively. Pillar number 3, the first homeowners grant. They have doubled the first homeowners grant from $15,000 to $30,000. Now that, very similar to the building bonus, is going to create a whole bunch of people who are very interested in accessing a brand spanking new home as their first home owner. So I anticipate that that's going to create a whole bunch of people moving towards that. Now, the other thing that they've done is they've announced an intention to help with the federal government scheme, which is the Help to Buy scheme, where effectively the government becomes your joint venture owner of your property. So they actually take shares in, or a percentage portion of ownership in your property, and help by, I guess, reducing the amount of deposit they actually require to actually get in. Now, the detail isn't yet out, but they're talking about it being as little as a 2% deposit in order to get into a property. So if you do the double whammy, a 2% deposit plus $30,000 going towards a brand new home, a lot of people are going to want to jump into the market very, very fast. So I think pillar number 3 is a major activation zone for the Queensland government. Pillar number 4, boost to social housing, 53,500 new homes by 2046. That is largely going to be the big scale developers actually doing things in consultation with the government. So that's not going to help us as individual small scale developers. And then working towards ending homelessness, again, a blanket statement. They've not really said how they're actually going to do that. But kudos to the government. They have said, I guess, their intention to do things. So if I look at all of those things together, I guess first homeowners grant, Queensland government again have doubled from 15 to 30,000. And I suspect that they won't be the only state government. So watch this space with regards to that as each state government actually starts to release their own initiatives. But it's going to be a little bit of a race, folks, with regards to 2 states trying to kickstart their construction businesses. This sounds very similar. I don't know if we've heard this before, very similar to the building boom that we just had that caused a whole bunch of people to go broke. The difference this time around is we don't have the global supply chain challenges that we did before, but we do have a lot less builders in the market. So I think the cost of construction, folks, is going to go up. All in all, let's have a read on where we think this is. So this is, I guess, major infrastructure projects. Well, we are spending big in that department. So that is, in my mind, that is a tailwind for the next 6 months. And because the money is going to keep on spending for quite some time, that is at least for the next 12 months. Cash incentive programs, again, I guess specifically in the Queensland government's department, but I think a lot more state governments are about to release this. I think we've got tailwinds in both of those departments, folks. So that's going to give us some, if I look at, I guess, those 2 things there, that alone, it says, hey, we're back, folks. Things are starting to head our way. Now, there's a lot more things that have to factor in, but straight away, we're seeing a big turnaround with regards to where we were before, okay? So let's go back and have a look at, I guess, the next segment, okay? Whoops, I've actually lost my my clicker. So population growth. So the next segment I'm looking at, population growth. So population growth, lots of different categories here, but not all of them are, I guess, going to move the dial, okay? So births, deaths, and marriages, for example, as we fall off the perch, brand new person gets born, we're pretty much at equilibrium, have been for quite some time. Australia is not growing through births, deaths, and marriages. It is, however, growing through other means, and more specifically, we're a country of migrants. So international migration has always been how Australia has grown from day zero, and that continues to still be the case. So let's take a look at some of the numbers that sit behind this. Let me get my button clicking going. Okay, so we're projected, we're currently just shy of 27 million people. We're projected to get to 39 million people by just after 2069 or 2070. So that is massive amount of population growth. But where is it actually all going to come from? Well, if we start to look at what has happened from our growth rate recently, you'll see that of late, we've had a massive, massive spike. As a matter of fact, we're at record numbers coming in, but we recently had, I guess, a massive drop-off. Why did we have a massive drop-off? Well, COVID, folks. We locked the borders. Nobody actually came in, which is a very good clue to tell you that most of our population growth is coming from international migration. And now those stats will actually bear out when I show the next few slides, but I guess that's a big indication of that. Now, where is the net overseas migration going? New South Wales is going to get, I guess, a bulk of it, followed very closely by Victoria and Queensland, WA, etc. afterwards. So New South Wales, I guess, gets the bulk of that right up front. Now, where do international migration people go first, folks? There's something that you need to know. Firstly, when they come in, they don't have local residency. Because they don't have local residency, they don't have any ability to borrow, which means that they are going to hit the rental market. Okay. Now I've got slides on the rental market coming up, but if all those people, record number 518,000 people, that's a record number of people. If all those people hit the rental market all at the same time, that puts a huge amount of pressure on the rental market. So let's look at where those stats are in a little while, but just put a pin drop in that for now. So 518,000 last year, but we're predicted to grow by $450,000 people on average over the next 5 years or so. So we are still going to have massive numbers coming in. Now, the interesting part is that we need skilled migrants, because what's actually happened is with all the major infrastructure projects actually happening, we're needing people in the construction industry. But the housing construction industry has actually dropped off. So what's happened is the housing construction, a lot of builders went broke. A lot of the tradies and that sort of thing went into, I guess, the major infrastructure projects. So now there's a massive shortfall in people in the housing construction industry. So we're needing to import people in order to be laborers and, chippies and plumbers and electricians and all those sorts of things. Okay. Now, the components of population growth, if we have a look in Brisbane, you'll see Brisbane. This dark blue one is the super interesting one. So the orange is the international migration. We've already covered that. The dark blue one is the interesting one. So dark blue one is internal migration. This is interstate migration. Okay. So you'll see that Brisbane and Perth are the only ones who have a positive input into growth that are coming from interstate migration. Okay. Whereas Melbourne and Sydney have got a negative outflow. That means a lot of people are leaving Melbourne, are leaving Sydney, moving to Southeast Queensland and Perth in particular across the board. And so that's one of those ones where I said before, there'll be a headwind for Sydney and Melbourne and a tailwind specifically for Brisbane. So that's location specific, folks. Okay, so let's look at the scorecard again. So intrastate migration out to regional, well, there was a lot of that actually happening during COVID. A lot of people leaving the city and going out rural, but that's kind of flattened off. Nobody's heading out there en masse like they were before. So that's kind of neutral. Interstate migration, I just touched on that before. A lot of people leaving Sydney, a lot of people leaving Melbourne and going to Perth and Brisbane in particular. So depending upon where you are, location specific for those two, and international migration, tailwind, folks, massive tailwind. So that's my scorecard on where I think those are going in the next little while. Now, the next one, let's look at supply and demand. Now, supply and demand, there's a couple of different elements that actually go to this. So let me just kind of face you momentarily as we kind of talk to this one. So in the development world, we use a whole bunch of technical jargon, okay, that I want to talk you through the phases that we actually go from a development process. So there's a development approval. That means that council have approved the potential for us to build something. We haven't built it yet. It's just we've been approved that we're allowed to build it. We're compliant with their rules. So that is potential supply, okay. Then we go and get a building approval. So the building approval takes those plans from council, development approval plans, and takes that to an engineering level and says, look, I know how deep the foundations are going to be. I know how deep the, is it what the slab's going to be? I know, is it going to be steel frame? Is it going to be timber frame? Those sorts. That's a building approval. Then we have a building commencement. So we actually start, we get finance approval, we actually get commencement. Then we get building completions and titles issued, etc. So that's the phases that we go through. Now, I'm not sure why this has occurred, but for some reason, when the Australian Bureau of Statistics start to measure these things, they've used different terminology. So when we talk about a development approval, they talk about a building approval. Okay, so that is effectively the same thing in ABS speak. Okay, now a building commencement, however, is still the same thing. So just understand that when we're looking at these stats, it can be misleading if you're looking purely at the terminology. So back to supply and demand. And okay, if we have a look at this, building approvals, noting read development approvals, okay. We were in a downward slope because of our economy at the time. I said we were in an okay state. We weren't doing fantastic. And then we came into COVID. Now, if you remember, as we coming into COVID, all the banks were predicting that we were going to be potentially having a 20 or 30% interest rate drop. If you remember those headlines, what happened at the time was no developer in their right mind was going to buy a property into a downward market that was dropping like a stone. And so there was a lot of development approvals that did not happen. So there's a whole bunch of potential supply in this window here that did not happen. Okay. Then the building approval, then the building, I guess, boom happened. So printing the money for the building bonus. And there was a whole bunch of development approvals that did happen in quick succession, but every single one of those were being taken up as quick as it could be approved. It was getting constructed all at the same time. Then with the cost of construction going up so much and so rapidly and so many builders actually going broke, then it started dropping off again like a stone and has dropped and dropped and dropped. And you can see here, we've actually got two waves in the yellow of development approvals that are very, very lacking, and one wave, which was green, where yes, lots happened, but it got consumed at the same time. So we've got a massive window of a couple of years of potential supply that never actually hit the system. Now, this is what the federal government saw when they said we're about to come into a housing crisis, because they saw this window coming and they went, when that hits us, there's no slack in the system. When the population growth actually starts to take up, there's no slack in the system to absorb this. So that's why they put the housing crisis together. I guess the National Cabinet together to actually come up with, I guess, those initiatives. Okay, so that's the cause, the catalyst for all of these things. Okay, so slump in approvals, surplus of approvals, but they got consumed, and then second wave slump. Okay, now what that has then translated into is building activity, the building commencements, again, because of the fact that the construction boom happened and the cost of building happened so high, it was so big that nobody is now, very few people are actually commencing our, I guess, new buildings at the moment. So not only do we have a lack of potential supply, but now we actually have a lack of actual supply. And so those two are starting to come into alignment and go, hang on, guys, look, this building, this housing crisis thing might actually be starting to become a real thing. And so that's kind of what the National Cabinet kind of saw. Okay. Now, if we have a look over time, we had massive escalation booms in construction caused by the supply chain logistics. Those supply chain logistics have been smoothed out, but Rawlinson's, who one of the people that actually track the cost of construction and cost of materials, are looking at this building boom that's actually about to occur, and they've calculated in, I guess, the different cost escalations that they believe over the next 12 months in all the different states. So anywhere between 5.5 and 8% uplift in construction cost, depending upon where you're actually going. And Brisbane being the biggest impact of that, because Brisbane is doing, I guess, a whole bunch of construction with regards to the Olympics coming up. And so not only are lots of people moving there, but also the Olympics coming here as well. There's lots of things actually happening in Brisbane. So the cost of building in Brisbane is way up over and above the others. So whatever you're doing from a feasibility perspective, you want to factor in these cost escalations. The good news is, folks, unlike previously, this is predictable cost escalations, whereas in COVID, it was unpredictable because we had no idea when the supply chain was actually going to get resolved. Okay. Now, the dwelling commencements, this is looking at this in a little bit more detail. This is functionally the exact same graph that we looked at before, okay, but before it was development approvals, okay, or building approvals, and this is the actual commencement. It's exactly the same pattern. There was a property market slump already, then COVID happened and nobody started to build stuff. Then we had a construction boom. Now we're on the second wave, drop. Okay, so none of that has changed. So lack of potential supply, lack of actual supply, and this bubble is getting closer and closer and closer to us. At the same time, that we've got a massive amount of population coming to us. What could possibly go wrong, folks? You heard it here first. We need housing. Okay, so let's have a look at what's going to happen next. Now, given that the national cabinet with the federal government have said, hey, all you states go out there and come up with incentives to actually, get people back into be doing construction. And 2 states have already done their announcements. The likelihood of all the other states coming out in very quick succession is pretty high. So development approvals, I think, is going to skyrocket. Building approvals, I think, is also going to skyrocket. And finance approvals in order to fund those are equally going to skyrocket because people need somewhere to live. So, folks, it's starting to happen. We're starting to see a sea of green with only some areas with some partial reds. So the last thing, and this is the kicker that will determine not if, but when the market takes off, the last one will be purchasing power. Now, if you can't afford to buy a property, then nobody's going to buy it. Doesn't matter how short we are, we're going to stay in the rental market. So purchasing power is a massive implication on impact on this. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give you a little bit of a lesson in how the government actually controls the purchasing power and speeds up or slows down the economy. Okay, so the Reserve Bank of Australia, or the RBA, use a thing called monetary policy to manage inflation and stimulate the economy. Now, we've got excuse me, we've got massive inflation because of the fact that we had those cost escalations and this global supply chain issues and everything, and the cost of everything went up. So inflation took off. And so the RBA want to know that when inflation takes off, they want to have this perfectly straight line. That's their intention, is this perfectly straight line. And that means a slow, steady growth to our economy. But if inflation takes off, if we get high inflation, it creates low unemployment, right? Low unemployment, everyone actually needs money to actually be in a job. But the cost of things is so high that nobody can actually spend. Okay. Whereas if it goes the other way, if we've got low inflation, everything's super affordable, but there's high unemployment. There's nobody with a job. And so when you think this through, just from a pure logic perspective, if I don't have a job, I can't spend money. If I can't spend money, the businesses out there are not going to be able to sell me something. So they're going to start dropping their prices, which is why you actually get, the cost of things come down. Okay. Whereas the exact opposite happens over here. I've got lots of people with lots of jobs and everyone can afford it. And so there's heaps of people with spare surplus cash actually starting to spend money, and that's what they do, and it causes the cost of everything to go up. So what the RBA want to do is they want to get us on that perfectly straight line, which is clearly not easy to do. So they do that through a thing called the inflation target. So their intention is to try and have a target between 2 and 3%. And if they can have it between 2 and 3%, then they know that it's a little bit like Goldilocks, not too hot, not too cold. It's just right. Okay, so that's what they're looking for, is that slow, steady growth of the economy. Now, that came about in 1992 after the recession that we had to have, and they brought this back into control. And I went through that recession, trust me. And so they've in this green bar is the 2 to 3% range. You can see they've been tracking relatively well across most of that. Now, this one here is the GFC, so that kind of shot out of bounds. And this here is the fact that our economy was actually tracking pretty, as I said, a little bit poor for some time. And they were trying, that's why the interest rates were being dropped, is they were trying to kickstart our economy, okay? Now, in doing so, then we had COVID. Then when all the supply chain issues happened and the cost of everything went up, it skyrocketed right to the top because the cost of materials went up and everything around the world. So food, building materials, cars, everything went up. So inflation took off like a rocket. In order to slow that down, the only thing that the RBA can actually do is interest rates. So they have ratcheted up our interest rates. We had, I believe it was 11 interest rate rises in a row. Now they have been flat for a little while now. And because they've been flat for a little while, it is slowly starting to come back. Now, the challenge here And if we look at the rate of incline and the rate of decline, both of them are super fast. So this rate of decline would actually be worrying the RBA at the moment. What they don't want to do, they don't want to shoot through this range. They don't want to shoot through the bottom and then get ourselves into potential, poor areas on the other side where where everything's going to take off again. Okay, but rather they want to have a soft landing somewhere into this range. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So the only thing that they can do to slow this down is change interest rates. So it's not so when will they slow down interest rates? Because it is already coming back into range. Now, if I look at the interest rates, as I said, 11 in a row, you can see they've been steady there for quite some time. But the question is, how long will they stay steady and when will they start to drop? Okay. Now, I've got some news on that in a sec, folks. Now, rental market challenges. I touched on this before. With all of those international migration people coming here, I guess was putting a whole bunch of pressure on the rental market straight away. Plus, the cost of interest meant that a lot of people couldn't actually afford to purchase a property anymore. So people were staying in the rental market. So what it meant was, with the cost of interest going up, landlords needed to cover their costs, so they ratcheted up the rents. And so you can see rent gone up, 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 rent gone up. Across the board, rents have gone up everywhere, folks. Okay, households in financial distress. You can see here there's a bucket load of people in financial distress. 12% of people that are unable to pay electricity and gas, unable to pay mortgages and rent on time. You get the idea, folks. People are actually starting to have some financial challenges in meeting these interest rate demands. So the government's got this delicate balancing act. They don't want to send us broke, but they equally don't want the economy to stay at a super high inflation rate. So they're monitoring our spending habits. They're monitoring what we're doing, and they're judging everything. So we just went through Christmas, which is typically a high spending area, where lots of people buy lots of presents for lots of people, and they were trying to get us through that period without overspending and overstimulating the economy. They wanted to slow us down just a little bit. Okay, so now the other thing in this area, unemployment rates. If you don't have a job, you don't have cash. If you don't have cash, you can't borrow anything. So we can see unemployment is starting to rise. So they need to keep a handle on those unemployment rates as well. So that's, again, another reason why pretty soon they're going to have to drop the interest rates. Now, I said as we came into Christmas, what the RBA was looking at was our household consumption. So this yellow line, disposable income, is, I guess, how much spare cash we've got. And the blue line is how much consumption that we had. So as we went over the last year, we were slowing down massively with the amount of spending, which is because the interest rates were starting to work, and again slowed down, into that Christmas period. So now they're forecasting, as things start to soften off, that we'll actually then start to have some surplus cash again. But that's forecasting based on if things actually happen, noting that we don't know yet if it's going to happen. So, but internally, the RBA probably has half a clue. Okay. So this is an extract from the RBA's, monthly announcements. It's called a forward projection. So the whole idea of a forward projection is that they're telling us what their intention is in the not too distant future. And so by projecting into the future where they want us to be, that gives us an idea as to whether or not they're going to hit us with a stick or put a hot poker in our butt to actually kickstart our economy. So this is just a one-liner extract. The central forecasts are for inflation to return to the target range of 2 to 3% in 2025. So not that far away, folks, and to the midpoint in 2026. So we have a timeline where they know that it's actually going to be back in range. So we've got, I'm going to say 12 to 18 months where we know that it's going to be back in range. So sometime in that 12 to 18 months, they've got to work out how do they pull the brakes on? When do they pull the brakes on? Because if they don't, it's going to overshoot the mark. Okay, so we know that that's going to happen. Now, because of all of that, these are the predictions from the bank. Now, this came from CanStar. The Commonwealth Bank believes that we are at our peak of 4.35%. And that our first cuts are going to be around November of 2024. dropping to a level of 3.6% by mid-25. Okay, Westpac similarly, we are at our peak of 435. First cut likely to occur in September. Okay, rates eventually dropping to 2.85 by the middle of 2025. Current levels, NAB, current levels at 4.35 is the peak again. First cuts in December, rates dropping to 3.1 by 2025, by the end of 2025. And ANZ, similarly, peak already, and we might expect the first rate cuts around September. So all four banks have said we are at our peak, interest rates won't go any higher. All four banks have said that they anticipate rate drops in the next 6 months or so, depending upon who we're listening to. Westpac says September, ANZ says September, Commonwealth Bank says November, and the NAB says December. So within 6 months or so, folks, we're expecting our first rate drop. And then they've all predicted where they want to be, or where they think we're going to be around mid-2025, which is when we are back in range, folks. Okay, so and that's where they think it's going to help to soften that landing on all of those. So now, what all of that means is right this very second, consumer confidence is down. Remember, consumer confidence is the indicator that's going to determine do I or don't I sell my property? Don't I employ someone in the economy? Don't I go spend money? So if consumer confidence is down, spending's down, I guess going and employing new people is down, going and buying unnecessary new houses is down, all that sort of stuff. So consumer confidence is very low outside of our normal range, folks. And so all of that is giving us some really good indicators. So what does all this mean? Well, there's an increased pressure on rising rates has stabilized. Okay, all of the banks are saying it's not going to go any further. Some vendors are struggling to pay their mortgages. We just saw that there were some vendors in distress as their fixed rates migrate over to variable rates, and they've gone from very, very low rates up to high rates, and it's burning into their cash pockets. We saw that with the surplus cash. Vendors know that interest rates have stabilized, but can they ride it out through the tough times? That's the question. So we're seeing a slowdown on unnecessary purchases, so less listings, less people buying properties, etc. But how many people are actually going to get to the point where they're going to be forced to sell? So many vendors might be. Okay, now that's tricky to know. Okay, is it some? Is it many? I don't know. There's a whole bunch of other facts that we need to factor into this, and today doesn't give us time to go into that. But there might be some opportunity for some opportunistic sales. Okay, opportunistic property sales, I should say. Now, if too many people get into stress in close succession, that's when there's going to be an avalanche. Okay. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. It's too early to tell at this point. So I don't think that's going to happen. But distressed sales create opportunities for purchasing, which create huge opportunities for no and low money down. Now, super important that I actually turn the slide deck off, and I want to actually look at all of you at this point in time. I do not want any of you, none of you out there, none of you taking advantage of people. Okay, this is about how can you help someone. Okay, if somebody's in financial distress, I don't want vultures coming in and actually taking advantage of that situation, but rather how do we work creatively with these people to say, look, you're in a financial challenge. I've got a cash flow challenge in my I guess development workflow. Can we work together where I can help you with some of that cash flow in order for you to allow me to buy some time, for example? Okay, so if you do that win-win scenario, then you're going to get some really great creative outcomes. If you go in with just a win-lose scenario, it creates, firstly, bad vibes. You might actually win the deal, but some poor person is now destitute, and that's just not a really good place to be. And we have to sleep with it, live with ourselves, and sleep at night. So that said, be kind, everyone, folks. Be kind. Okay. So what does that all mean? I guess for next steps in the market. Interest rates are not going to slow down in the next 6 months, but will slow down straight after that. So neutral for the next little while. Unemployment rates are starting to rise, so that's going to be a little bit of a headwind. Fiscal policy, I've not actually spoke to this. This is APRA. Okay, APRA have the ability to slow down just individual market segments. They've not indicated anything at all with regards to their intention to slow us down. So all in all, folks, when I look at all of that, it's telling me that the next little while, so the tail end of that 6 months is where I see there's going to be some, the tail end of that 6 months is where I see the opportunities are going to start to present themselves. There's going to be some opportunistic way to work with people right now with no and low money down. We've seen we're pretty much at the turning point of the market. And so the opportunity to buy low now, and because of those tailwinds behind us, the market uplift that's actually going to come from that is pretty massive. All of that says in my humble assessment, okay, noting again, I'm not an economist, noting I'm not telling you what to do, but all of that's telling me, folks, time to act is, or you can only ever act now. It doesn't matter if the market's going up or the market's going down. The only time you can ever act is now. So my question is, given everything that you've actually got, is this the time when you actually are going to act? Okay, so if you are super interested in the property development space and wanting to know what you could actually do about that, we do have a 12-month education and mentoring program. It's called the Property Development Formula. If you think that now is the right time for you, and you think that the market is, and I encourage you to go get this independent assessment everywhere else. If you think that is the right time to assess them, to jump into the market, you've got a little bit of time, folks. You got 6 months before everything starts to kick pretty hard. So now is the time to bunker in, learn the skills, get in, and actually get the job done. So, folks, I hope you got plenty out of that. Just letting you know that even if you're not up for, I guess, the 12-month education and mentoring side of things, we do have a free course. Okay, so the 7-step formula to financial freedom. This is giving you the breakdown of what it is that I teach my students on how to actually get into the market and do things in a scalable and sustainable way and actually build their property development career. And if that's something that you really, really love and you want to hang around with a community of like-minded people doing all those things, then come to one of our upcoming meetups. We run these events in 4 states, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide. We also live stream them all the way around the country. So no matter where you are, there's always going to be something that you can actually turn up to. So folks, I hope you got plenty from that. I'm glad that I've been able to share that information with you, and hopefully some of you will go out and validate that for yourselves and go and take the action that you need to take. Remember, you can only ever take action right now. You can't act in the future. You can't act in the past. The only time to act is now. So is your time now? That's my question to you, folks. Till then, I'm going to say, catch you all at our next meetups. Bye for now.